David, we're doing this thing.
Welcome.
We've got Paul Golf with us.
We do have Paul Golf with us all the way from, where are you? Bristol? Leeds? Where the heck are you today, Paul?
Leeds. I'm in Clevedon, which is just outside Bristol.
Okay.
The British Riviera.
Wow. Oxymoronic in nature and tone and maybe scope as well? I'm not sure.
3 for 3.
3 for 3.
The British Riviera, can you tell me a little bit more about that, Paul?
Well, I can tell you that we have the second highest tidal range in the world.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know what that means.
After Newfoundland.
Was that a theological, philosophical, or more of a sociological statement, Paul? We're not sure.
I mean, I can make it all three.
Okay.
I do believe
3 for 3 again.
I do believe you can do that. Across All Worlds, guys, we're back. We're in Baxter's office. You can find us at acrossallworlds.com. And we're going to have a conversation with Paul Golf.
And if you're just joining and haven't been a part of the show, I'm actually not usually the host.
That's
I'm
right.
kind of a co-host. I'm stepping in for Baxter. He's been away for a day of recording, and so welcome. And I'm thrilled to be a part of this conversation.
Yeah, and for those who don't know or maybe haven't seen any other conversations we've had, you've become an incredible friend to me. You're the catalyst behind this Across All Worlds show. You normally sit over in Baxter's corner there at his desk and count down for us and keep us on track and provide us with topics to dive into and shake your head like you cannot believe that we just said that.
Right. Yeah.
We also have the amazing Paul Golf, who's also a friend, a dear friend to both of us, but also to Baxter, and has been greatly involved in all things perichoresis over the last 4 or 5 years.
At least, yeah, probably longer.
I mean, I know you guys traveled the world together. You were in India last year. In fact, I think, Paul, you went. I was invited to that trip, but ended up having a wedding that I was committed to. But one of these days, we're going to actually be face-to-face in person. We'll have tacos, obviously. But share a little bit about, well, go ahead. I know you've got thoughts on that.
Well, I was just going to say, don't hold out for good tacos in London. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Share a little bit about yourself as we get this thing going, man.
It's always hard, isn't it? How do you share? I've been working with David and Baxter for probably 6-7 years. I got to know Baxter through John Crowder and know David through Baxter. So I split my time. I kind of have 3 very broad boxes that to me are all the same thing, but they do correspond to slightly different activities. So one is I'm associate professor in University of Bristol. So I'm doing that part-time. Another one is to do with regenerative business. And the third one is more kind of direct Christian ministry and missions type things and getting on video calls like this, generally making a nuisance of myself, particularly to the religiously complacent.
Right.
Yeah.
You were also a mime, I believe, once.
Pantomime, not a mime.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's a difference.
It's a very important distinction.
There's a difference.
Think, Paul,
you've never been to a British pantomime. You've never been here in Christmas, have you?
No, I've not. But I do appreciate you delineating.
Do you know how to do balloon animals, Paul? That's what I really.
You're the magician, not me.
That's true. It's true. Anyway.
But that was in a former life, because I do know we've had these conversations. In fact, we had just caught up out of friendship a few days ago before we knew we were going to have you on the show. And I know your past, some of it anyway. And you've got some wild stories, both BC, which we were trying to figure out what else I could stand for. But and then afterwards as well, I think some of the conversation that we were having the other day that maybe we dive into is what we're awakening to coming into the experience of the love of God, that charismatic, probably the world that you were raised in, and then this Trinitarian revelation, this Trinitarian faith. That the conversation we had was how much fun it was to have Baxter and John in the same space, because they're so varied, so different in their backgrounds. But I know you have a past. Like, share a little bit about.
Paul, can I just add a footnote to that? You used the phrase religiously complacent. Can we revisit that before this episode ends? Because I just want to unpack that a little bit. I'll be honest with you, Paul, I think, Jason, you guys know me well enough to know these types of conversations make me very uncomfortable. Right?
Especially on camera.
Especially on camera, right? Am I going to be misrepresented? Will people understand the words that we use, the concepts? Oh, what about the baggage we bring to the table and so on? And I just think that's so important to and it's really hard to lay that out, right? Because we've all got the truckload behind us, no matter who we are. Right. No matter what David Dark says, life is too short to pretend you're not religious, right? So anyway, Paul, I'd love to revisit that if we can, and if it's not in this episode, maybe another one.
No, that's great. Well, here's an opener for you, which hopefully you'll like, David. I was thinking about the Nativity, Christmas. I mean, not just because of Christmas pantomimes, which if anyone's been to a British Christmas pantomime, you'll know it's not a mime like the kind of white face, white gloves kind of mime thing. That's not it. You can go look it up. But at the Nativity, it really struck me one day that we make a big deal about getting all of our ducks in a row in terms of being rational and logical and right. But actually, at the birth of Christ, it was the magicians that got there, and the logicians weren't anywhere to be seen, right? So for where we put a great deal of emphasis on logic, actually, at least in the Christmas story, magic is a little more appropriate. And not just in the Disney way either.
Right.
So mystery over mathematics.
Yeah, mystery over mathematics. I think it's the language of the heart preceding the language of the head. Wonder, experience, all those kind of things, encounter. I think we can get a friend of mine, back to the religiously complacent point, a friend of mine once described the condition of the Western Church, or not all of the Western Church, but a fair amount of it, as cognitive Protestantism or cognitive evangelicalism. Was a phrase that he came up with. That it's just like getting everything right on paper,
right,
in an abstract way, in an intellectual way, but actually having no real life or no substance. I like to say, truth in the Greek, we've got the Spirit is called the Spirit of Truth. Jesus says, I am the truth. But that word truth in the Greek, aletheia, means reality. It's not just truth in a sort of abstract, formal sense. It's truth that you live. I like to say truth bleeds when you bite into it. And that's the incarnation. That's Jesus. And that's real, immediate, present tense, experiential reality, which includes the kind of logical and abstract as well. But I think that a lot of our conversations, and I used to live in a Bible college, for 6 years I lived in a Bible college. A lot of the conversations are so sort of disconnected from reality. And so I think that we always want to have, certainly I always want to have I want a gospel that works in every situation, and I want a gospel that means something at ground level, not just as a sort of intellectual abstraction. Although, as I say, I'm a university professor, so we can do the intellectual abstraction as well. Right. But it's not. I think that's not where it lies. I love the way you put it, Jason. A lot of the time, you talk about relational theology. If Jesus is the truth, then the truth is a person, and that means that the kind of truth Jesus is talking about is personal and therefore relational, right?
Yeah.
Hey guys, this is Baxter Kruger here. I'm with my friend Jason Clark. We have an ongoing conversation about all things Trinitarian, about the real meaning of the death of Jesus, the practical side of living the Christian life in union with Jesus and in the union with us. And this is ongoing. It's been quite beautiful. We've got well over 60 or 70 episodes recorded so far, but welcome, come join us. Let's get to the conversation.
Paul, years ago, I talked about in a paper that I wrote back in my philosophical days or my academic days, this notion of relational logic. Obviously, poking the bear a little bit, what's relational about logic? I remember a professor of mine saying, David, you need to divorce all logical statements from context. Well, how the heck do you do that?
Right.
I mean, that's not even possible. So would you say that 2 + 2 = 5 for you every now and then?
Yeah, every now and then I think it does, doesn't it? For sure. I think we share the same suspicion of analytic philosophy, David.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would.
Too much algebra makes Jack a dull boy.
Well, this is
there you go.
Thomas J. Ord has that phrase, the logic of love.
Right.
Which,
right. Well, you know where I went, just to come around, to play a little bit of fun, have a little bit of fun here, is the U2 line from, I think it's from Miracle Drug, love and logic keep us clear.
Yeah.
And every time I hear that line, which is, often enough, I suppose, I'm not sure I totally agree. I think love brings the clarity.
Yeah, I agree.
I think maybe logic brings some of the structure. So in a sense, I guess it provides clarity, I suppose. But if we're going to presuppose relationship, and by the way, we haven't talked at all about your past yet, Paul, which I love, but we're going to get to that. We're going to get to your story, I promise.
Well, I think. Oh, go ahead, Paul. You got something?
No, you carry on.
Well, in light of what we're talking about, and even the conversation that we had the other day on the phone, where especially those of us, but we talk about this, and I know some of your past, the experiences that we've had with the love of God throughout our lives, the ones where the hair rises on your, whether it's experiencing Him through art, through film, or for me, growing up in the charismatic expression, I would experience Him often in these services, profoundly. And we were talking about, the falling out in the Spirit, these moments of profound awareness of this logic of love that is transcendent, but also the reality that the gospel message that has often been connected to that, almost at times, it's a separation-based message, right? And so, what we were talking about, you were just in a meeting where you could say that you could speak to this. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I could say I've been in these meetings myself where, for instance, I'll tell a story when I was a roadie for Phil Driscoll way back in the day, 18 years old. For 6 months, I was a roadie. Phil Driscoll was a trumpet player, for those who don't remember, 30-some years ago. Very, very, very gifted, skilled trumpet player, anointed. And for the first 3 months of my 6-month stay, he called me Scott, because it was the guys before me were named Scott, so it was easier.
So he was in.
He was really in. He was a very intense personality. He played with Joe Cocker, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Dylan, and then he got saved. But we're at a concert, and he's on the microphone, and he says, "The Spirit of God is in this place." And you feel this manifest goodness, this love, right? You feel it. And then he steps off, and he's got a little lapel mic that he wants to tell us to cue the next song, because he's playing the tracks. So he backs off the mic, and he cues us the next song, and then he gets back up. And I'm an 18-year-old kid who has been immersed in this charismatic expression. I can feel what we would call the glory or the manifest goodness of God in the room. And he's speaking to it, and there's no question that I even talking about it, I can go, oh man, this is, and then he tells us to cue a song, gets back on the mic, "The Spirit of God is in this place," got a gravelly voice, and we cued the wrong song. And he's an intense,
fantastic.
By accident.
Fantastic.
By accident. He backed off the mic, "Spirit of God is in this place." And it was, "If I got to come back there, I'm going to kick your bup, 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 bup." Cussed us out, and then got back on the mic. And we're back there, terrified, because he was an intense personality, and he, but the dichotomy of being in a space where the presence of God is so real, but oftentimes it's outside of love, or it's outside of, and you were telling a story about that, about your experiences recently of experientially knowing Him, but at the same time, the theology being very flawed. And what excites me in the moment we're in, and I want you to speak to this, is, and I bring it back to when I was with you guys last year, and I'm with Baxter in the room, and I'm with John Crowder, and they're both in the room, and they're both speaking to this good news, this idea that there's no shadow of turning, the logic of love, this 2 + 2 = 5 reality in the perichoretic understanding, in this union understanding. And what we were talking about the other day is I ache for the day where we can be in a room and union is the message, the theology is trustworthy, and we're having these experiences. But Paul, I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yeah, sure. I came from a very charismatic background. Not that I grew up in it. I became a Christian in my teens. But when I say very, I mean like the deep end charismatic, Pentecostal,
right.
And the holiness side of it as well. So it's like Pentecostal holiness or sort of charismatic holiness. So it had a bit of that Wesleyan. You got to be sort of perfectly sanctified, and then if you're really super holy, then you get a chance to have the Holy Spirit hang out with you,
right,
or something.
Right. Try and get them to come.
Right. Lots of that. Very hardcore. So I've got a whole set of stories from that time of my life that a lot of it was very intense. It was very works driven, I would say. When I was at university, I was in a Calvinistic church. They called me the free will heretic because I was never into this Calvinism thing,
right.
God choosing some people and rejecting others.
Right.
Couldn't ever get on board with any of that. But I was really inspired by Charles Finney, the American revivalist, and he would say, I read his autobiography. It's one of his first books. It's his journal, actually, one of the first things I read as a Christian. And he talked about revival, and by revival he meant mass awakenings to the Christian faith, mass
right.
conversions. Revival is merely the natural result of the correctly applied means, is what he would say. And those correctly applied means consisted of praying for as hard and as long as you can before every meeting. And if
right.
that meant 8 hours, you do it 8 hours. Right.
Right.
Number two, preaching the gospel, which meant something for him, which might mean a little something different to what we had understand today. But anyway, preaching. Actually, for him, he was preaching agency. It was interesting because at that time, everybody was really into the Calvinist thing in the wake of George Whitfield's ministry. And he said they would sit in churches and pray that God would convert them, but they would never know whether or not they could be converted because only God can do the converting because it's all on his choice, So, well, you better just pray and hope that you're one of the saved and not one of the damned, but you can't make that happen.
Right.
So he was really against this too. So I liked him, but he would preach and say to people, no, you need to get with the program now, effectively. So he had this very immediate thing. And the third one is he just said was going in and doing these meetings and then going and visiting people house to house, having one-to-one conversations. So he said, every city I went to, I just did the same thing. And then this is what happened. There were mass conversions and all the rest. So we had this thing of, well, God wants to move. He loves people. He wants to bless them. But why isn't that happening? Well, it's not happening because we're not getting with the program. So somebody needs to do something in a kind of intercessory way, which qualifies us to be conduits or recipients or something of the grace of heaven. And then that's the way in which the kingdom is going to grow, or people are going to become Christians or what have you. Very much it's a holiness, kind of Wesleyan, Finian, revivalist type thing. So it was very hardcore because the pressure's completely on you.
Right.
If nothing's happening the way it's supposed to, in scare quotes, then, well, it's your fault, right? So we'd say everywhere Jesus went, he healed everybody. So if you're not healing everybody, it's obviously your fault because Jesus is the same today.
Right.
He wants to heal them. If he's not healing them, it's because you haven't prayed enough or fasted enough, or you've got some sin in your life or something like that. So it was super boom and bust. But having said that, I did see God turn up and do extraordinary things.
Right.
But most of the time it was ultra stressful, raise your blood pressure for you step 1 foot wrong and the whole thing is going to disappear,
Yeah. This is
so that was sorry, go on. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, are you familiar with this?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Charismatics scare me to death, just for the record, right? Based on my history and my tradition and what I grew up in, a very brethren tradition, a very conservative tradition, certainly theologically, and also just in how they presented themselves, if that makes sense.
By the way, they scared me too, even when I was in the meeting.
Right. So listen, after all these years of growing up in it, pushing back against it, rebelling on certain levels and not others, and studying philosophy and buying into, the gospel according to Nietzsche and so on, I still can't even hear you talk, Paul, without being triggered on some level. And you and I are friends.
That's why I said it to you, too.
Yeah. Like I'm going, okay, you know what? Maybe I can just exit stage left here on this conversation.
But this is where the conversation's about to shift.
Of course it is.
Let me shift it. Let me tell you a good story.
Come on.
You're not going to believe this, Paul, but we've only got about 6 minutes left in this episode. So we're going to have to carry this over into...
Well, I'll tell you a good story that will happen within 6 minutes.
There we go. Here we go. Well done.
This was a few years ago.
Clearly the Spirit of God is moving.
Pre-COVID, few years, at the time, a lot of what I was doing was cross-cultural mission and kind of revival meetings. So I'd get invited around, and it would be worship, praying for the sick, and just any prayer for people, actually, not necessarily just praying for the sick, and kind of helping people get opened up to hearing the voice of God. And by that I mean just helping them experience it, different kinds of things, having sort of pictures, visions, dreams, or just following senses, intuitions, sort of just basic 101 spiritual things, right?
Yeah, this is the relational stuff you're talking about.
Sorry?
From a relational perspective.
Relational, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was in a church, and they'd asked me to teach on practical prophecy. How do we get better at listening to God, basically? We don't feel like we ever hear God. How do we get better at doing that? So I'd done a few sessions of teaching, Bible teaching and some, practice and things. And then that was the Friday and the Saturday. And then the Saturday evening was going to be just a worship time and then an open meeting. We didn't really have a plan for it. It was in quite a big Anglican church. And I remember in the evening meeting, something just happened in the room. And I felt like I get this feeling sometimes where it's a bit like you catch a current underwater, or you feel something that's moving. And I've learned to just kind of yield to that, relax back into it. And anytime that happens, then interesting things happen in the room. It's the only way I can put it.
Right.
And that began to happen. And I really started feeling, it felt like a real sort of bubbling up of joy, of being inebriated, but in my kind of slightly in a kind of half trance state. And I'm standing up the front of the room. I'm supposed to preach, but I don't want to preach. I just kind of want to stand there and let things happen. And then I had a radio mic. I started talking. I don't remember what I was saying, but at some point I noticed that there were some kids sitting at the back who were playing with their phones, and they weren't really paying attention. And I thought this was kind of funny. And before I knew it, I found myself walking down the aisle in the middle of this big Anglican church. I still had the radio mic, and I carried on preaching, and I was walking slowly down towards the back of the church. And as I was going, I thought, well, I've started walking, I'll just keep going. So I just kept going, and I walked out the back of the church, walked out the door. And I just felt like what I wanted to do. I was just following the currents, And I was still on the mic the whole time. And then I waited there for a few minutes and thought, I'll go back in now. And I just walked back in. I never called any attention to it or anything. Anyway, at the end of it, my wife said to me, "What on earth were you doing?" And I said, "I don't know. It just seemed kind of funny." But this guy comes up to me and he's shaking at the end. He's been really affected by the meeting. He just said, "Thank you so much for the meeting. That was really amazing." And I said, "Oh, yeah, thank you for saying so," and all the rest. Anyway, I got home and I got a phone call from the woman who was organizing. And she said, "I have to tell you the story about what happened to this one guy." She said, "So much happened in the day, but I've got to tell you this one story. There was this guy who was there, and he is getting ready to go for Anglican ordination. It means he's about to be ordained as an Anglican priest.
Yeah.
And he had never encountered anything like this before, and he really enjoyed all the teaching stuff. But when it came to the Saturday evening, he was really, like, people laughing or all of that, it really bothered him."
Right.
And she said he was sitting in the pew And he was silently praying, God, I don't think any of this Holy Spirit stuff is real. And he says, if this is real, make Paul walk out the back of the church.
Come on. This is 2 + 2 = 5 right here.
Yes, or just a really good magic trick. I'm not sure which.
I love you.
So anyway, he's the guy who came up at the end, I was thinking, well, I didn't hear anything say walk out the back of the church. I was just I caught like at this current, that feeling of that moving of the Spirit. It always makes me think of Jesus. He says the wind blows where it pleases. You can't tell what it's going to do.
Yeah.
That's what it's like being of the Spirit. And that's what it felt like that day. And at least in that one instance for that guy, that was like a real immediate direct answer to prayer for him in that moment, which was an honest question about, is this just hype? Is this just, natural or crazy or whatever?
Right.
Or is this really a Holy Spirit thing?
Yeah.
And so but I know whenever I've got that sense of being in that flow, that kind of stuff always happens. I've never had a moment where something like that hasn't. I've had other times where that I haven't felt that, or I have, and people kind of have testimonies of what they feel has happened in a meeting or in a conversation, one way or another. But the few times I've had that kind of experience, something always happens, and it's always something extraordinary. And so that's what causes me, because David and I, we've talked a fair bit about this, and I think my natural propensity is to be kind of skeptical, critical. I know how easy it is to manipulate and share those same misgivings. But when I've kind of experienced it for myself, it's almost, well, I'm as amazed as anybody else.
It's the response of union that we're describing, which we're going to have to pause and pick up in the next episode. But this is a lot of fun.
Paul, I just wanted to say, Scott and I are really looking forward to continuing this conversation with you.
We'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks, guys. See you.
Across all worlds, he came for us. We